Hello and welcome to what is now part 2 of this video series on secret societies. So the apprenticeship level, a lot of people will say they are woke. This is where Star Wars comes in. Because what comes with that is a feeling, generally from conspiracy theories, but not exclusively to, because it can come from other perspectives where you now have this perception of a government or a world order that is working against humanity. So there is this desire to spread the word, and you will often be advocating things that are not going to sit well with a lot of other people, and because a lot of it is designed for divide and conquer. There is a solution to that in the individual, where you take that divide inside oneself and you find the resolution by bringing yourself back together. An expanded consciousness, as it were, because this comes more at the sort of master level, so I'm having to skip a little bit here. It comes from asking all those internal questions. It's like, what is this information? What is the intention behind this information? Is it telling me the truth? Is it trying to emit certain emotions and feelings from me? What am I then meant to do with that information? Am I supposed to spread it to the outside world? Of course, you will find like-minded people along the way, but you will also find a lot of opposition to these things. But the apprentice level, the woke, as it is sort of referred to, is like Star Wars. It is the Ewok, which is an anagram of woke. So what you'll find is, you may find yourself in like a primitive community setting, like the Ewoks in the Star Wars film. They're out in nature. They've got spears and they've got bows and arrows. They're now in direct conflict with an empire that has stormtroopers and a far greater firepower. How well is that going to work out? It can be on the lines of a protest, and you're going to come up with government forces in the form of police with water cannons and things to disperse crowds. It's very similar to that Ewok versus the Empire situation. So a natural progression out of this apprenticeship stage are the craftsmen. Those that maybe have a charismatic personality, who can really deep dive into these things, get a lot of information, and then create a YouTube channel, something I've done. So as much as anything else, this applies to me. I'm not ashamed to say that, because there's another pattern. A lot of these things are designed to get you to feel shame. You'll find at the left-wing sort of spectrum in the political world, there is a tendency to sort of outreach to the outer circles, to embrace the most culturally different to yourself in preference to the closer, whereas the right-wing perspective will work in the opposite direction of, you will define things as family, as culture, as nation, and then it will start moving to the outer circles of culturally very different, and all these identifier labels. So it can be anything from racism, from supremacy of a particular race, and then seeing another race as being totally alien and your enemy, and so on. Again, it's all divide and conquer. But also see that you're in a realm, the way I would look at this, it is a simulation. It is holographic. Not only do you have this background scene of nature, you have an awful lot of what look to be human beings that are part of this background scene, what are called NPCs, non-player characters. So the craftsmen are those that are then possibly getting a following. There's also a danger of this that ego will come into play, and that can be encouraged by numbers of viewers, size of channel, and so on as well. But then it requires moving to the next degree. Maybe some of you think, oh, he's talking about me already. It's some things I've already said, but again, I'm going to reiterate, and I wish to hammer this point home. And you can see this in the external world. If you have a perception, whether it be a government or a one world government or a control system in place, that I lost my train of thought there. So it's now come back. You may have this perception of this control system in place. And in some ways you're going to be making yourself a target. You will get a following through this. And you'll be advocating things you have looked into. But you're still wide open because you're only looking at the external. But if you have this perception of, be it a government, even local governments and beyond, that it's corrupt, it's an inside job is an expression, but that's a reflection because this is all an inside job. It requires taking the next step. So if you feel triggered, like I said on the previous video, it's about asking the internal questions. Asking is as king, the quest eye on. What you're presented with, whatever you look at, is a story. It's a store eye. It's what you take in and store inside yourself and what you do with that information. There's a saying, particularly amongst the spiritual side of things, that all the answers are within, go within. And I feel often that is not really explained, and it certainly does sound nonsensical when you first encounter it, when you are at that sort of apprentice level. Matt of Quantum of Conscience will say, call it the first grade truther level, which is a good description of this. It's very easy to get lured back in at all levels of this, and certainly when you're making progress and you're developing a following and building up a YouTube channel, for example, that the ego can that's a huge internal rabbit hole that needs to be confronted and addressed inside ourselves. Because at the apprentice level, as an Ewok, you will encounter a Death Star. And that story shown in Star Wars as a metaphor is actually a very good one, because what you've got to deliver is something bang on target, right to the heart of that Death Star. So what is the Death Star? It is created, because it is artificial, it is created from the conscious mind, from all the truth-seeking or whatever avenue you've gone down and what you're now staunchly advocating to such an extreme. So what you're transferring from your conscious side of the mind to the subconscious is going to create feelings which is going to change the chemistry of every cell in your body. So if I turn now to use a biblical explanation, now the story is of this Yahweh, this voice behind the burning bush, saying to Moses, go out and kill everybody in my name. But when you internalize that, is it such a terrible thing? Because what you're actually killing is that Death Star inside yourself that is actually destroying you from inside. Because what you're filling yourself with is feelings that are very unpleasant, very negative. That's not to say you shouldn't go through this experience. Rather, I would say it is a worthwhile experience to sit in that discomfort zone, but get to the point where you can find the balance inside yourself and be able to confront and address that Death Star that you have created in yourself from what you have imported, generally through truth-seeking, but not exclusively so. It's open actually to far more. It can be religion, it can be politics. There are all variations of this. They are all kinds of secret societies. Some are more secret than others. And obviously is more than one secret society operating. Sometimes they collaborate, sometimes they don't. Again, it's perception. What you see as a secret society. It's often talked about all the ones seen as the most negative that may or may not involve rituals and things that may or may not involve involuntary participants, particularly non-adults, is the best way to put it. We're not going to even dwell on that. We're just looking at the broad overall pattern to all of these things. But I'd like you to get to what I would call the master level, where you can hear what another says. Actually, here's a perfect example. And I've observed this, and I normally just go silent and just become an observer of this. When I go to Monchique, you'll have a group of, say, 6, 7 or 8 people sitting around a table, and you can have conversations about the conspiracy theories and things. But what generally happens is one will be speaking, one will be listening, and then a second conversation will start, or another sitting around that table will send out the virtue signal of getting their cell phone out and start looking at it and ignoring what the others are saying. This is really where expanded consciousness can be shown. There is a sort of almost a physicality to expanded consciousness. Certainly in the material world, it's taken very physical with fast food, which is actually expanding the body, generally around the waistline. Again, it's a reflection. But internally, it requires you to now play the part of the patient that's laying on the couch, of playing the part of being the psychiatrist that is listening and also being the observer of what's going on. So I sort of step into that role in the external when I start seeing this situation happen where there'll be a conversation going on, and it may be that the one that is talking, it really matters to them. I'm trying to think of an everyday example. So they've injured themselves in some way, maybe a car accident, and a lot of people, and very much amongst the woke community, are just looking for cues to say, oh yeah, that happened to me, and they completely cut off the one that's talking. Or you'll get these other conversations going on around that same table, and I'm just sitting there thinking, well, I can't listen to all these conversations at once, so I just observe. There is also things that are said where you'll feel it inside yourself, where you want to be able to, oh, that, yes, that happened to me. I've certainly been through that experience. But consider the one that is talking, put yourself in their shoes. They're talking about something that matters to them. So if you put yourself in that position, how would it feel to you if you're talking about something you feel passionate about, but now you've been cut off because you've been interrupted? This happens a lot. I'm not saying I'm not immune to it. We all do it. But over a period of time, and it is always practice makes perfect, it is always through repetition. And again, this is reflected in the external world, particularly in the education system, because did any of us come into this world, into this physical reality, knowing the 12 times table? Or did we have to learn it through repetition? Likewise, did we learn to walk by just taking one step? Did we not stumble and fall over? Maybe not the first step, maybe the second or third, but we didn't give up. We kept going until we perfected it, until it became second nature. It's the same with driving. From that first driving lesson where you're consciously thinking, oh, I've got to check the seatbelt's on, the parking brake is on, it's the gear levers in neutral or whatever. But it comes to a point where you can then drive and you do these things almost automatically, like second nature. So this is a pattern with this as well, to reach that master level, to move up in these degrees. Now, within each of these three subsets, these three levels, apprentice, craftsman, and master, it can be further defined into smaller groups, but that would go right down into the devil is in the detail, and this is just a general broad overview to this. And we've reached 17 minutes, so I'm going to stop this video here and carry on part 3.